Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Clinker2. In today's video we're going to be talking about how to make all the dyes in Minecraft up to Minecraft version 1.19. Starting off we have the red dye, and on the left to the right here we got the rosebush, the poppy, the red tulip, and the beetroot. And for the flowers here, we can pretty much just find these in the overworld or in the flower biome. They're pretty common, so you shouldn't be able to have too much of an issue finding those. And the beetroot you find at farms, normally at villages. And you can sometimes find them in chests underground in dungeons. But outside of that, this is a pretty easy dye to get. Next we'll move on to the yellow dye. And this one you have the dandelion and the sunflower. And pretty much the same thing as the red flowers. You just find these in the overworld or you find them in flower biomes. They're pretty easy to come by as well. Next up we have blue dye. And blue dye has the cornflower and lapis lazuli. And you find lapis lazuli underground, and then you have to craft it into the blue dye. But the flower, you pretty much just find it in the overworld and the flower biome as well. Next up is the green dye. The green dye, you have to get a cactus, and normally they only spawn in the desert. Sometimes you can find them in chests in the desert or around the desert. But you just need to get a cactus, and then you put it in a furnace. That's what the fire represents. And then it makes the green dye. You got the orange dye, and there is a flower you can use to directly get the orange dye, which is the orange tulip. If you don't have the orange tulip, you can make red and yellow dye and then combine them with the crafting table, and that makes the orange dye. Next up we have the purple dye. And the purple dye you need lapis lazuli or blue dye. They're pretty much interchangeable, just like bone and bone meal later on. And then you have red dye, and you combine the lapis lazuli or blue dye with the red dye and it makes the purple dye. Now we have the brown dye, and these have to have cocoa beans. These are a little bit harder to find because you have to be either in the jungle biome or find them in a chest underground. It's normally where they spawn. And yeah, you just get cocoa beans and then you make them in a dye at a crafting table. Next up we have white dye. And you need bones, and you get these from just killing skeletons. You sometimes, the skeletons burn from the overworld with the sun and stuff like that. So basically you just get bones and then you turn them into dye by using the crafting table. The black dye is the hardest to get and also pretty easy as well. So if you do the wither rose, which is what's on the left here, it's pretty hard to get because you have to have the wither kill mobs, and the wither is an endgame boss, so that's really not optimal, but I did put it up here just for people to know that you can put wither roses in the crafting table and turn them into black dye. The ink sac is a much more easier approach, and by that you just go in the water and you find some squits that spawn and kill them. And if you have fortune on your pickaxe, you'll be able to pick up a lot of this. Or looting, I mean, on your sword, not fortune. The gray dye, you basically just need white dye or bone meal. And then you need black dye or ink sac, and then you can combine any of these four to make gray dye. Next up we have light gray dye, and for this there's a lot of flowers that you can use. You can use the Azura Balut, the Ox-Eye Daisy, or the white tulip, and those just spawn in the overworld or in flower biomes. They're pretty common as well. The other option is basically having bone or bone meal, and then you combine that with gray dye and you get light gray dye. Next up is lime green. So sea pickles spawn in the ocean biome, and you can sometimes just find those. They're pretty common if you find the right biome. If not, you have to look for coral reefs. And you put the sea pickle in a furnace, just like you do with the cactus, and it makes the lime green. Your other option is having bone or bone meal plus green dye, and that makes the lime green. Light blue is, you can find this as a flower just spawning in, and it's called the blue orchid. And you basically just find these in the overworld or the flower biome. They're pretty much all the flowers in the game spawn in the overworld or in the flower biome. They're very easy to find for the most part. Other than that, you can use you can use bone meal or white dye, and then you combine that with lapis lazuli and blue dye, and you get light blue dye. And then next up is pink. So there's also flowers for this, so you can just get right off the bat. That's a peony and the pink tulip. Find those in overworld or in flower biomes. Or you can combine red dye and white dye or bone meal, and you'll be able to get pink dye. Next up we have magenta. And magenta is just straight up, you have to have purple dye and pink dye, and then you combine it to get magenta. It's the only way to get it. And then cyan, you use blue dye or lapis lazuli, and then you add that in with some green dye, and you can get cyan. So yeah, that is all the dyes up to Minecraft version 1.19. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Please like, follow, and subscribe, and comment down below if you want to, or like what tutorials you want to see me do, or just if you like the video. So yeah, have a good day, everyone.